The thud was sickening primal. Not the triumphant thud of a deal struck or a rival vanquished, but the wet, fleshy impact of a man hitting asphalt. Dina's face, a canvas of grotesque rage, writhed at my feet. The dull gleam of a street lamp catching the arterial spray that painted the back of my rented van. My hand instinctively finding Peter's tarnished silver ring, twisted it, a cold clinical assessment overriding the primal terror that might have crippled a lesser man. The air thick with the scent of fear and something metallic was a stage for Lulu's final guttural snarls as she completed her work. This was the inevitable consequence of underestimating Victor Kane, even if the tools of his vengeance were for once not his own cunning words, but primal instinct. A man like me wasn't meant for such sordid spectacles. My domain was the gilded cage of galleries, the hushed whispers of auction houses, not the blood-soaked tarmac of a forgotten highway. Yet such was the price of ambition, a desperate bid to outrun the specter of my past, a past that began ironically with another man's fleeting fortune and my own carefully laid plans unraveling just days before. It had started with Reginald Vance, a man whose portfolio was as impressive as his ego was fragile. I'd seen the opening a chink in his armor the moment he dismissed an emerging artist's work with a sneer, only for it to skyrocket in value mere weeks later. My own coffers perpetually depleted by the facade of luxury, I was forced to maintain the bespoke suits, the exclusive club memberships, the endless stream of expensive champagne I poured for potential marks had cried out for replenishment. Emma, bless her naive heart, had been growing restless with my elusive schedule, her soft inquiries about our future, a constant annoying hum beneath the grand symphony of my schemes. I needed a substantial win, a score significant enough to silence the whispers of doubt, both hers and, more importantly, my own. Reginald, I decided, was the answer. His weakness, an unquenchable thirst for an original of a certain post-impressionist landscape, a piece rumored to be lost for decades, a canvas that would cement his legacy among the truly discerning. I, Victor Kane, would find it for him. The painting, of course, was a meticulously crafted forgery I'd commissioned from a desperate, talented artist I held in my debt. The plan was flawless, until it wasn't. Vance, it seemed, wasn't as oblivious as his vanity suggested. He'd uncovered the deception not through any lapse in my cunning, but through a careless remark made by my partner in the forgery. A man whose greed had outweighed his discretion. The confrontation had been ugly, public, and threatened to unravel my carefully constructed world. I fled, of course. A strategic retreat, not a shameful escape. I arranged for my most valuable assets to be discreetly transferred. Not my bespoke suits, those were expendable, but the smaller, more liquid pieces from my inventory, and of course Lulu. She was draped across the back seat of the meticulously detailed luxury sedan. I usually drove a creature of such refined grace she commanded attention without even trying. A borzoi with a coat like spun moonlight and eyes the color of cognac. I had purchased her from a discredited Russian countess, a masterstroke of acquisition, transforming a creature of faded aristocracy into my personal living testament to taste and power. I had her trained by a former Special Forces dog handler, not just in obedience, but in the art of intimidation, of controlled aggression. She was an extension of my will, a silent, elegant threat. But then an anonymous tip, or perhaps a rival's vengeful whisper, reached the ears of those who might question the provenance of my assets. Not the police, no, that would have been too crude. Worse, private investigators. They would have seen my usual vehicle, my usual attire, and known exactly who I was. And so, in a moment of utter stomach-churning indignity, I found myself behind the wheel of this rented cargo van. Its utilitarian interior a stark affront to my sensibilities, Lulu sprawled uncomfortably in the back. The stench of stale fast food and cheap disinfectant clung to the synthetic upholstery, a grim reminder of how precarious my position truly was. The irony was a bitter taste on my tongue. I, Victor Kane, on the run in a glorified box on wheels, escaping a self-made trap, while chasing the elusive scent of salvation in South Carolina, where a cousin owed me a favor. The drive was endless, a monotonous blur of flat fields and garish roadside diners. My cedar and amber cologne, usually a subtle declaration of presence, felt wasted in this confined, unappreciative space. I twisted Peter's ring, the tarnished silver cool against my skin, a constant abrasive reminder of a childhood spent in grimy tenements, the kind of squalor I had sworn Peter would never know, the kind I swore I would never return to. The hunger pangs of poverty still echoed in the gnawing emptiness in my gut, even as my mind raced, calculating, plotting. Then came the clang. A sharp metallic shriek that vibrated through the worn chassis of the van, wrenching the wheel from my grasp. The engine sputtered, died, and the vehicle veered wildly, its momentum carrying it onto an unlit exit ramp. Richard & Sons Auto Repair, a faded sign, announced a quarter-mile ahead. A rural trap. I suppressed a snarl. This was exactly the kind of provincial inconvenience that threatened to expose the raw, desperate nerves beneath my polished veneer. I climbed out, smoothing the lapels of my tailored, albeit travel-worn blazer. No one was going to see Victor Kane looking anything but impeccable, even stranded in a backwater. The air hung heavy with the smell of grease and damp earth. Lulu, emerging from the back, surveyed the scene with a languid disdain that mirrored my own. Richard Meadows, the shop's proprietor, ambled out, a man seemingly carved from old wood, his face a roadmap of benign credulity. His sons Abel and Dean were a study in contrasts. Abel, gaunt and taciturn, moved with the quiet efficiency of a shadow, his eyes darting away from mine, a clear sign of insecurity. Dean, on the other hand, was a different sort of predator. Tall, with the kind of rough-hewn good looks that turned heads in small towns, he oozed a crude, unrefined confidence. As he ran diagnostics on my van, his gaze lingered not on the machinery but on me, a predatory glint in his eyes that I recognized instantly. He was a simpler, less sophisticated version of myself, driven by base desires rather than grand ambition. I observed him cool and detached, making a mental note in my pocket notebook. Dean, handsome, aggressive, enjoys the hunt. Weakness, overconfident, susceptible to flattery, likely underestimated. When he bent to pet Lulu, she responded with a low, guttural growl, her aristocratic muzzle wrinkled in a silent warning. He recoiled slightly, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. "She's fiercely loyal," I said, a silky thread of pride in my voice, a subtle challenge. "Prefers her own kind of company, you understand, I'm sure." I offered him a disarming smile, the kind that promised camaraderie while concealing calculation. "She's a champion bloodline, you see. Rare breed. Took me months to acquire her. The price was astronomical, but for something truly exquisite, one must spare no expense." I watched his eyes, gauging the effect of my carefully chosen words, his fleeting envy a satisfying affirmation. I retreated to the dusty office, my phone clutched in my hand, feigning preoccupation. I could feel Dean's gaze, a dull, persistent hum against my skin. Richard, oblivious, prattled on about the van, about his sons, about the harshness of the economy. I listened with half an ear, my mind already working, dissecting their vulnerabilities. Abel shuffled in and out, a ghost in the background, his soft apologies for his presence only reinforcing his insignificance. He was easy prey, a man begging to be overlooked. I knew his type. My father, in his rare moments of sobriety, had worn the same lost expression. The memory was a sudden, unwelcome chill, and I twisted Peter's ring, the cool metal a grounding force against the unwelcome intrusion. "Peter, you wouldn't have let yourself be caught in this squalor." The repairs, of course, were exorbitant. I paid with a flourish, a credit card that at this very moment was dangerously close to its limit, but my smile never wavered. "Excellent work, Richard." I purred, clapping him on the shoulder. The efficiency of a true master craftsman, one rarely finds such dedication these days. My compliments to your sons, especially Dean, a very capable young man. I'll be sure to mention you to my acquaintances in the city. You never know when a man of influence might need a reliable service. I watched his face flush with pride, a pathetic, predictable reaction. He smiled, a grandfatherly sort of smile. "Drive safe, son," he said, his voice laced with genuine warmth. The sentiment grated on me, a false sincerity from a fool. Back on the road, the darkness pressed in heavier now. The forest, a dense, suffocating wall of shadows, swallowed the van's weak headlights. A shiver, not of cold, but of unease, traced its way down my spine. Lulu in the back began to bark. Not her usual imperious barks, but a low, guttural growl, a rumble of primal warning that vibrated through the floorboards. It was a sound I knew well, a sound she reserved for intruders, for threats. I tried to soothe her, my voice a calm, controlled murmur, but she didn't quiet. Her growls intensified, a frantic urgency in their tone, her body rigid as she stared, unblinking, into the rear of the van. Then I heard it, breathing. Deep, muffled, and unmistakably human, a cold wave of recognition, then a surge of something else, something sharper, colder, settled over me. Dean, the fool, he'd seen something. My elegant cologne perhaps clinging to the leather of my wallet, or a glimpse of the discreet heavy case I had hidden beneath a tarp. He had climbed in a crude, pathetic attempt to prey on the lone traveler. My chest tightened, not from fear, but from a cold, calculating fury. He had dared to underestimate Victor Kane. My fingers, trembling with a controlled rage, fumbled against the cold, rough edge of the door handle, slipping once before I managed to push it open. "Stay," I commanded Lulu, my voice a low, steady rumble, even as my knees felt a momentary tremor, a fleeting echo of the helpless boy who couldn't save his brother. I stepped out of the van, forcing my legs to be steady, my posture erect. Lulu, ignoring my command, loyal to her nature, sprang out beside me, landing with a low growl rumbling from deep within her chest. She circled me protectively, her movements sharp and deliberate, her growls growing louder. Her gaze fixed on the back of the truck, her body tense, ready to spring. This creature, a testament to my discerning taste, was about to prove her true value. The van's rear door creaked open. A figure tumbled out, hitting the pavement with a sickening thud. Dean. His face was twisted, not handsome now, but a mask of savage rage, sweat glistening on his skin. He clutched a knife in one hand, the blade catching the faint, weak glow of the distant street lamp. "Goddamn dog," he snarled, his voice hoarse. "Barking all night. You've been making my life hell. You think you're so smart, don't you, flaunting your wealth in my face?" I stood my ground, my legs like lead, but a strange exhilaration coursed through me. He had exposed himself, revealing the crude beast beneath the superficial charm. This was the moment I reclaimed control. "Grateful," I said, my voice dangerously soft, laced with a contempt that only I could truly appreciate. "You're lucky to be alive, boy. You have no idea the depths of foolishness you just plumbed. My brother Abel thought you were worth the risk. He was a sentimental fool. Me, I'm simply a man who doesn't tolerate being exploited." Lulu lunged, a flash of white fur, a blur of motion. It was magnificent. The knife slashed across her back, a shallow cut splitting her pristine fur, a thin line of blood seeping out. My jaw clenched. He had defiled my property, but she didn't stop. A guttural growl erupted from her as her jaws clamped down on Dean's wrist, the crunch of bone reverberating through the night. His scream pierced the air, raw and primal, as blood sprayed onto the pavement in wild arcs. The knife clattered from his grasp, spinning away, a useless tool against primal force. Lulu wasn't done. With an almost animalistic precision, she released his wrist and lunged again, her teeth sinking into his throat. Dean's gurgled gasps were drowned out by her snarls, and the dark asphalt beneath them became slick with a viscous sheen of blood. The scent was cloying, nauseating, yet strangely exhilarating. My silver ring felt hot against my skin. Peter, you'd understand, I couldn't be weak. Not again. By the time the distant wail of sirens grew louder, Dean lay crumpled on the pavement, his breaths ragged and wet, his once handsome face now a grotesque mask of shredded skin and blood. My arms trembled not with fear, but with the aftermath of adrenaline as I cradled Lulu in my lap, her fur matted with blood, both hers and his. Her breathing was shallow but steady, each rise and fall of her chest a fragile testament to her loyalty to my foresight. My vision blurred, but I wouldn't let myself cry. "You did well, girl," I whispered, my voice rough. "You performed exactly as I trained you." Guilt, a fleeting, unwelcome guest, clawed at me for her injuries, but I swiftly pushed it down. She was a valuable asset, and assets sometimes incurred costs. When the police arrived, I was calm, collected, the picture of an affluent traveler traumatized by a random, brutal attack. My cologne, subtle yet present, clung to the air around me, a counterpoint to the coppery stench. I recounted a tale of terror, of pure, unadulterated victimhood, carefully omitting any detail that might hint at my true purpose for being on that god-forsaken road or the cargo I carried. I even managed a convincing display of tearful gratitude towards Lulu, whose picture I knew would soon grace the news. "Hero dog saves art dealer," the headlines would scream. A new narrative, a new opportunity. Abel, the silent brother, was arrested the next morning. His expression was a cold, empty mask, devoid of remorse, mirroring the hollowness I often felt myself. The full horror unraveled. The brothers had been luring women to the shop for over a year. 7 bodies, lifeless and discarded, had been unearthed in the woods near the highway, all lone travelers, just like the image I had carefully cultivated. The weight of what could have been crushed me, a fleeting pang of fear that I swiftly converted into a renewed resolve. They thought they could break me, but they only made me stronger. Lulu recovered slowly, her wounds leaving scars, imperfections that I would later explain away as battle-mark signs of her heroic nature, further elevating her mystique.